What if I told you that the most dangerous war of the 21st century didn't involve a single missile, a single soldier, or even a single battlefield? That right now, at this very moment, a global conflict is unfolding silently beneath the surface of our everyday lives. A conflict fought not with weapons or armies, but with currency reserves, semiconductor, supply chains, artificial intelligence models, rare earth monopolies, shadow banking networks, and trillion-dollar debt traps. A conflict where entire nations can fall without a shot fired, where economies can collapse before their politicians even know what happened, where the winner won't be the country with the biggest military, but the country that can control the flow of money itself. And here's the part almost nobody realizes. This financial war didn't start in 2025. It didn't start with tariffs, sanctions, or spy balloons. It started decades earlier, triggered by a single economic decision, almost forgotten by history. A decision that set off a chain reaction leading directly to the crisis the world is facing right now. In this documentary, we're going to follow that chain reaction from its origins to today. We allow look at how the United States and China, two economic superpowers, became locked in a high financial Cold War that is now reaching a breaking point in 2025. War that has the power to change the value of your money, your job, your retirement, and the stability of the entire global financial system. And by the end, you will see a pattern, a repeating cycle of economic rise and decline, and the surprising reason why almost no country involved in this conflict can escape the outcome that is coming. This is the secret financial war between the USA and China minus 2025 update. Let's begin. To understand the financial war of today, you have to go back not to 2016, not to 2008, not even to the rise of Xi Jinping, but to 1971. That was the year the United States made a decision so financially explosive that even President Nixon didn't understand how dramatically it would reshape the world. This was the year the US ended the gold standard. By breaking the dollar linky to gold, the US gained the ability to create money at will, something no empire in history had fully controlled before. This shift created the foundation of what the world now calls the petrodollar system, where oil and eventually global trade itself became priced almost exclusively in US dollars. This singular change gave America a financial weapon the world had never seen, the power to print the world's reserve currency. But there's a twist most people miss. While America was unlocking this new financial superpower, China was still recovering from political chaos. In the early 1970s, China was poor, largely closed off from global trade, and decades away from becoming a financial rival. But in the background, unnoticed by most Western leaders, the seeds of China's rise were being planted. In 1978, China opened to foreign investment. In the 1980s, China became the manufacturing center of the world. By the 1990s, it started accumulating massive trade surpluses. And by the 2000s, those surpluses created something incredibly dangerous. China began accumulating trillions of US dollars in US Treasury bonds, the very backbone of America's financial dominance. And once China held that leverage, the financial war began. Not with a declaration, not with a tariff, but with a single, silent fact. China controlled a huge portion of America's debt, and America controlled the value of China's savings. Two superpowers tied together, each dependent on the other, each terrified of what the other might do. This was the beginning of the quietest yet most consequential conflict of the modern era. For the next 30 years, China played a masterful long game, a game almost no one in Washington understood until it was too late. Manufacturing dominance, China became the factory of the world. Walmart, Apple, Nike, the biggest brands in the US relied on Chinese labor and Chinese supply chains. Every time an American bought a product, US dollars flooded into China. Those dollars were then reinvested into US Treasury bonds. This kept its interest rates low, which fueled American borrowing, which increased consumer spending, which sent more dollars back to China. China created a financial loop, a circular system that strengthened China's economy while deepening America's dependency. By the 2000s, China began building something else, the foundations of a shadow financial empire. State-backed banks with near-limitless lending power, overseas infrastructure loans through the Belt and Road Initiative, currency swaps that gave developing countries access to yuan instead of dollars, strategic mineral acquisitions across Africa and South America, rare earth dominance, controlling 90% of global refining capacity. These moves were subtle, no headlines, no announcements, but they were devastatingly effective. Every factory built overseas, every mine acquired, every port controlled was another step in weakening U.S. influence. Step 3. The turning point, the 2008 financial crisis. When the U.S. housing market collapsed, Washington assumed China would collapse with it. Instead, something remarkable happened. China used the crisis as an opportunity to triple its influence. While America was drowning in debt, China used its massive savings to bail out its own banks, expand overseas loans, buy undervalued assets, and begin the shift from manufacturing power to technological power. And here's where the financial war escalated into its next phase. The breaking point, 2001-62025. Most people think the financial war began with Trump's tariffs, but tariffs were just the moment the public finally noticed something that had been building for decades. What really triggered the open conflict was something deeper. China began preparing to challenge the US dollar, the dollar threat, the digital yuan in 2020. China quietly launched the world's first major central bank digital currency, the East. This was not crypto. It was the opposite. A fully state-controlled, programmable currency with the potential to track every transaction in real time. More importantly, it could be used for cross-border payments outside the US-controlled SWIFT system. If widely adopted, the digital yuan could bypass American sanctions, bypass the dollar, and potentially undermine US financial power. Washington saw it as a direct threat. The technology shockwave at the same time. China's technology rise began alarming US policymakers. Huawei leading 5G, Tencent and Alibaba dominating digital payments, China producing more STEM graduates than the US AI investment skyrocketing. China patenting 2x more technologies than America, China controlling 80% of the world's battery manufacturing capacity, China building the world's fastest supercomputers. This wasn't just an economic challenge, it was a strategic one. Technological dominance is financial dominance. Financial dominance is geopolitical power. America strikes back, the sanction era. Starting in 2018 and escalating every year since, the US launched a barrage of sanction-based weapons, banning Huawei, restricting semiconductor exports, limiting AI chip sales, regulating investment flows, tightening control over foreign listings. These weren't random acts. They were a financial containment strategy. The goal wasn't to hurt Chinese companies. The goal was to prevent China from controlling the technologies that control the money supply of the future. Quantum computing, artificial intelligence, 5G and 6G, semiconductors, digital currencies. Whoever controls these controls global finance. China counterstrikes the resource war cutoff from cutting-edge chips. China played its strongest card. China began hinting at export restrictions on rare earth elements. Materials the US needs to build everything from iPhones to F-35 jets. They also increased control over graphite, gallium, and germanium, all essential for electronics and batteries. You want to cut off our technology? We can cut off your supply chain. But 2023 to 2025 introduced a new battlefield, one that neither nation can ignore. By 2025, the financial war has entered its most dangerous phase yet. Not because one side is winning, but because both sides are losing in different ways. Here's what the world looks like now. China's debt bubble reaches critical mass. China's growth model is slowing. Property developers collapse. Local governments drown in debt. Youth, unemployment rises. Export demand stagnates. For the first time in decades, China can't rely on easy growth. So what does Beijing do? It doubles down on centralization, capital controls, and state-run mega projects. This gives China short-term stability, but long-term financial fragility. The Chinese financial system is now a pressure cooker. America's debt spiral becomes a national security threat. Meanwhile, the US faces a different crisis. National debt crossing $35 trillion, interest payments surpassing military spending, de-dollarization accelerating among BRICS nations, inflation still persistent, massive budget deficits every year, widening wealth inequality, a polarized political system unable to agree on fiscal policy, America's financial superpower. The dollar is strong right now, but its foundations are beginning to crack, and China knows it. The dollar versus yuan power struggle intensifies while the yuan is not ready to replace the dollar. China isn't trying to replace it. China is trying to bypass it. And slowly, quietly, it's working. More oil deals denominated in yuan BRICS, pushing a shared settlement currency, China buying gold at historic levels, dozens of countries testing digital yuan settlements, Russia fully switching major trade to yuan, Middle Eastern nations deepening currency alignment with China. None of these alone threatens the dollar, but together they do something more dangerous. They reduce global dependence on the dollar, and every time global dependence decreases, America's ability to sanction nations, print money, or control global finance weakens. Slowly, quietly, reversibly, the AI arms race heats the financial war. Artificial intelligence is not just about productivity. It's a financial weapon. Determinist who leads in future markets, who controls automation, who dominates digital currencies, who controls surveillance systems, whose military has the best predictive models, whose corporations stay globally competitive. By 2025, the US leads in foundational AI, China leads in applied AI and surveillance AI. China outpaces the US in AI adoption. Both nations invest billions in AI chip infrastructure. AI regulations diverge, creating separate tech ecosystems. This technological decoupling translates directly into financial decoupling. Two incompatible systems, two incompatible currencies, to incompatible technological platforms. We are witnessing the first stage of a bifurcated global economy, a world split between two financial spheres. Supply chains become geopolitical weapons, semiconductors, batteries, pharmaceutical ingredients, AI chips, rare earths, energy, infrastructure, all are now used as negotiation tools in the financial war. Every supply chain disruption is now political. Every resource shortage is strategic. Every tariff is every sanction has a counter-sanction. This is not trade. This is warfare through economics. But perhaps the most dangerous fallout of 2025 is something most analysts are ignoring. Both nations have become trapped by the very strategies they use to weaken the other. Over the past decade, both the US and China attempted solutions to stabilize the economic rivalry. Ironically, almost all of them backfired. Failed fix number one: tariffs. The US believed tariffs would bring manufacturing home. US companies moved production to Vietnam, India, and Mexico, not the US. American consumers paid higher prices, China diversified exports, the global supply chain became even more complex, inflation increased in the US, China became more self-sufficient in critical sectors. Tariffs were a band-aid that caused long-term damage. Failed fix number two: chip sanctions. The US tried to cripple China's semiconductor industry. Short-term, it worked. Long-term, it accelerated China's domestic chip development by 10 to 15 years. China poured billions into chip lithography, advanced packaging, memory manufacturing, AI chip design, cleanroom fabrication. Sovereign semiconductor supply chain development. Sanctions created the very competitor the US wanted to prevent. Failed fix number three: China's property stimulus. Every time China's economy slowed, Beijing pumped more money into real estate. This led to ghost cities, speculative bubbles, insolvent developers, unpayable local government debt, shrinking household wealth, a generational decline in economic confidence instead of stabilizing growth. Stimulus weakened the entire financial system. Failed fix number four: de-dollarization pushes countries tried to move away from the dollar too quickly. This led to currency instability, capital flight, liquidity shortages, higher borrowing costs, increased dependence on China, fragmentation of global trade. The world learned a painful truth. Escaping the dollar is risky, but relying on it is risky too. Failed fix number five: digital currency experiments. China pushed aggressively. The US hesitated quietly. Smaller nations competed both badly. Result: fragmented systems, cyber risk exposure, privacy concerns, low adoption, geopolitical suspicion, incompatible infrastructures. Digital currencies were supposed to unify the global economy. Instead, they increased the divide. And in 2025, both superpowers are realizing something uncomfortable. There may be no way to end this financial war without triggering a global economic reset. But history reveals something even more unsettling. The US and China are not the first two empires to face this financial struggle, because the patterns we're seeing today have all happened before. To make sense of what's happening in 2025, we have to look at history not through wars or ideology, but through economic cycles. When you compare the US-China rivalry to past great power transitions, a pattern emerges: Dutch versus British Empire, Portugal versus Spain. In Everkazi, the conflict didn't begin with soldiers. It began with financial dominance slipping. China, massive trade surpluses for 30 years. British Empire, massive war debt in the 1900s. U.S. Marshall Plan, British Empire, sterling reserve currency, China, AI adoption, Indovenozu, production, digital payments, U.S. post-war technology leadership in the 20th century, 2025, global bifurcation into U.S.-aligned and China-aligned blocks. History suggests a single catalyst: financial panic, technological disruption, sanctions, or resource shock forces a global reset. In previous transitions, the financial rivalry led to trade fractures, currency devaluations, resource conflicts, political polarization, technological arms races, and eventually a shift in global power structures. But here's the part nobody likes to admit: these cycles are not stoppable. They're only manageable. And in 2025, the US and China are in the late stages of a cycle that always ends in one of three ways: peaceful coexistence with separate systems unlikely to financial spheres, to tech stacks, to currencies; full decoupling triggering a global recession, possible a supply chain shock or sanction spiral breaks global trade; a controlled reset of global financial systems, most likely new digital currency frameworks, restructured debts, new trade alliances. But the most important question isn't what happens globally. It's what happens to you. By now, you've seen the origins, rise, breaking point, fallout, and failed fixes. You've seen how the US and China accidentally locked themselves into an economic rivalry they can't escape. The US-China financial war is not going to end with a treaty, because it's not a war between two governments, two ways of structuring money, power, technology, and trade. And here's the uncomfortable truth: both systems need each other more than they want to admit. Yet both systems are preparing for a future where the other one collapses. This contradiction is what makes 2025 so volatile. The real question is, can both sides avoid losing at the same time? Because if they don't, the world's financial order could experience its biggest transformation since 1944.